The current was faster than it looked. Freezing water rushed against his chest as he staggered into the river, boots slipping on algae-slick stones, lungs burning with panic. He couldn't see the shoreline anymore, just a blur of pine trees and whitecaps, the forest vanishing into mist. But he saw the bear, thrashing, drowning, and he kept going. Logan Reed had spent most of his life in wild places. As a ranger stationed deep in British Columbia's inland wilderness, he had seen animals wounded, cornered, dying, but never like this. The bear was massive, a young grizzly, maybe 2 or 3 years old, caught in the swirling edge of the rapids. Its head bobbed once above the surface, then vanished beneath a wave. That was the moment Logan dropped his radio, and Dove. He didn't stop to think. Not about the weight of the bear, not about the cold or the current or the consequences. Just instinct. A flicker of motion, brown fur rolling helplessly in white water, had cut through his training, his fear, even his common sense. Something about the way it struggled, the way it clawed at the water, like a child fighting sleep, made him move. Each stroke forward felt like dragging himself through ice. The water roared in his ears and the rocks below bit into his legs, but he reached the bear before either of them disappeared. It wasn't conscious. One paw floated limp, the other twitched. Its body, bloated with swallowed water, sank just below the surface, for flattened and eyes closed. He wrapped one arm around its torso, thick with muscle, dead weight, and kicked. No one was watching. There were no cameras, no crowd, just a man and a dying creature locked in a current that wanted them both gone. He didn't call for help. He didn't scream. He just held on and pushed. 15 minutes passed before they reached the gravel bar near the bend. His hands were numb. His lips blue. He collapsed beside the bear's body, coughing up river water, unsure if either of them had truly survived. And then the bear moved. Not much. Just a shallow gasp, a twitch of its paw. But it was enough. Logan rolled onto his side, staring at the creature as it struggled for air. He didn't know why he was crying, only that the thing he'd risked everything to save was still breathing beside him. The bear didn't rise that night. It lay sprawled in the mud beside the riverbank, chest rising in uneven bursts, eyes shut against the fading light. Logan had managed to drag them both above the waterline, but he had no fire, no dry clothes, and no way to call for help. The nearest ranger outpost was miles away, and his radio had disappeared downstream the moment he dove. He tore branches from low pines and built a windbreak against the evening chill. His hands shook uncontrollably. The air turned sharp as the sky dimmed, and the bear remained still. Logan didn't sleep. He sat against a rock, his soaked jacket pressed to the bear's side, as if proximity alone might anchor the life he'd nearly lost. By dawn, frost coated the grass in silver, and the river had quieted into mist. The bear stirred. Its nose twitched. Slowly, it turned its head, not all the way, just enough for one heavy eye to open and meet Logan's gaze. No growl, no panic, just silence. Logan exhaled, long and uneven. That moment of eye contact wasn't natural. Bears didn't look at humans like that, not without threat or fear. But this wasn't fear. It was something else, like recognition. The way a drowning man might look at the stranger who pulled him from the edge. He spoke quietly, not in words, just sound, a hum, a murmur, something low and steady to fill the space between them. The bear blinked, its paw flexed weakly. Then it laid its head back down and closed its eye again. Logan knew it wouldn't survive out here alone, not in its condition. The forest would eat it alive, wolves, starvation, infection. But carrying it back was impossible. He could barely carry himself. So he stayed. For 3 days he stayed. He foraged for roots, broke ice for water, and collected insect from bark to place beside the bear's mouth. The animal didn't eat, not at first, but by the second night, it licked the water from Logan's hand. By the third, it had shifted its body closer to his, just enough that their fur and fabric touched when the wind rose. Logan wasn't sure what drove him. He didn't think of duty anymore, or science, or even survival. He just couldn't leave it. There was something fragile now beneath the creature's size, something that reminded him of everything he'd once lost. A long time ago, he had tried and failed to save a child from drowning in these same woods. His nephew, a boy with bright eyes and a laugh like wind through leaves. The river hadn't spared him, but this time something had, and Logan didn't know if it was fate or redemption. He only knew that this bear was alive, and as long as it stayed beside him, so was he. On the fourth morning, the bear stood. It rose slowly, limbs shaky and unsure, like a newborn testing gravity for the first time. Logan watched from where he knelt beside the fire pit, breath caught somewhere between awe and fear. The grizzly's massive frame blocked the rising sun, casting a long shadow over the riverbank. Its fur was still damp in places, matted and dark from cold nights and broken sleep, but its stance was solid. Oh, it didn't move toward him. It didn't move away. It just stood, chest rising slow, eyes fixed on a man who had stayed through the worst of it. There was no threat in its posture, no wild panic, just presence. That strange stillness animals held when something unspoken passed between worlds. Then it turned toward the trees. Logan didn't follow. He didn't call out. There was nothing to say. The bear paused once at the tree lean, glanced back over its shoulder, not to wait, but to remember, and then disappeared into the underbrush. Logan sat in the silence it left behind. He stayed that way until the sun rose high enough to melt the frost off the leaves. Only then did he stand. His body hurt in a dozen ways. Muscles stiff, cuts dried into crusts. But there was something different in his chest, something unwound, something quiet. He found the trail again by midday and hiked the long miles back to the ranger station. No one believed him at first. A grizzly, nearly drowned, saved by hand, nursed without tranquilizers or cages. He had no photos, no video, just scratches and silence. They logged the report, nodded politely, and moved on. But something strange began to happen weeks later. Sightings came in from hikers and campers in the southern sector. A large young grizzly, healthy, unusually calm, not aggressive, not curious, just watching. One man said it emerged from the trees during a rainstorm and stood between his tent and a nearby pack of wolves, then left before dawn. Another told of finding his injured dog curled beside a bear in the grass, sleeping soundly, untouched. The stories multiplied. No attacks, no growls, just appearances, brief, quiet, and always without threat. Then came the video. A wildlife drone operator caught a clip from the treetops near Clearwater Ridge. It showed a man approaching a river bend with his fishing gear when a bear stepped into the clearing from the opposite side. The man froze, but the bear didn't charge. Instead, it slowly walked the river's edge, dipped one paw in, then turned its gaze upward toward the drone, toward the sky. Then, with no sign of fear, it sat down and waited. The video went viral. Some called it a hoax. Others called it a miracle. But those who knew the wild, who had lived in its unforgiving silence, recognized something different. They saw memory, not instinct, not coincidence. Something had changed. By the time summer turned to fall, Logan had returned to the ridge. He wasn't sent there. He went on his own, unofficial, unannounced. The department had shifted focus to tagging wolves that year, and no one questioned when he volunteered for remote patrol. But it wasn't work that pulled him north. It was something else. Something quiet that lived under his ribs now. A pull, a need to see. He hiked the old trail slowly, favoring a limp he hadn't bothered to explain. The river looked calmer in autumn light, but he still remembered the weight of the bear's body in his arms, the cold that had cut through his bones, the silence afterward. He didn't expect to find anything. He only wanted to walk to places where they had once existed together. It was near dusk when he saw it. Not the bear, not yet, but the signs. A claw mark on the bark of cedar. Not deep, not territorial. Just a scratch, like a pause in thought. Further on, he found a half-eaten trout, dropped cleanly by the water's edge. No other prints. No drag. Just a fish, laid down with a kind of deliberateness that didn't feel wild. He followed the river upstream and stopped at the gravel bar where it had all begun. The stones were dry now, warmed by late sun. The water moved slower. He sat on the same flat rock where he had once collapsed beside the bear, hands blistered, heart pounding. He stayed there until the sky bruised purple, until the first stars began to blink awake above the tree line. Then came the sound. Not loud, not fast, just a soft shift of weight through dry grass. He turned his head slowly. The bear stood at the edge of the clearing, taller now, broader, fully grown, its coat thick with the golden hue of health. For a moment, it didn't move, just stood there, as if unsure of the space between them. Logan stayed seated. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't even blink. The bear took one step forward, then another. It stopped a few feet from him, closer than it should have, close enough to strike. But there was no threat, just breath, just presence. And then, without sound, the bear lowered its massive head until its brow touched the stone beside Logan's boot. Not a bow, not submission, just stillness. Logan felt his chest tighten, not with fear, with something else. The kind of ache that has no language. They remained like that for a moment, man and beast, survivor and saved, until the bear lifted its head, gave a long, deliberate blink, and turned back toward the trees. It didn't rush. It didn't vanish. It simply walked back into the wild. And Logan remained on the stone, unmoving, staring into the dark until the only thing left was the echo of a memory that somehow still breathed. The forest didn't speak after that. It didn't rustle or call out. It simply closed around the moment as if nothing had happened, as if it hadn't just witnessed something unspeakable, a gesture that had no place in a world ruled by instinct. Logan sat for a long time after the bear left. The night grew colder. Dew crept over the stone. His breath became visible, but he didn't feel the cold the same way anymore. Something had shifted inside him, not in a grand, cinematic way, but in the quiet way a scar settles after years of pain, like the soft throb of something finally made whole. The next day, he hiked out with steady steps. The limp remained, but the weight he carried had lightened, not because he had found closure, not even because the bear had remembered, but because something in that return, something wordless, had handed him back a piece of himself he thought the river had stolen years ago. At the ranger station, no one asked where he'd gone. They had their own maps, their own patrol routes and digital trackers. No one had room in their schedules for the slow, impossible truths of memory. Logan didn't try to explain. Some stories weren't meant for words. Some belonged to the wind and the water and the rustle of pine needles under heavy paws. Over the months that followed, reports of the strange bear continued. A hiker had gotten lost in the southern range and claimed a bear had stood on the path between her and a hidden cliff drop, blocking her from stepping forward. She said she'd screamed, cried, and then watched in disbelief as the animal slowly backed away, refusing to budge until she turned around. A wildlife photographer left his tripod unattended to relieve himself and returned to find the bear sitting silently in the frame, facing the lens, almost posing. The photo won a conservation award, but he never shared what he saw in the bear's eyes. Only said it wasn't just looking, it was remembering. And then there was a forest fire. Lightning had split the ridge near Clearwater, and flames raced through the underbrush. Helicopters dropped water. Drones scanned for survivors. In one shot, brief, blurry, almost overlooked, a bear was captured nudging a trapped fawn toward an opening in the smoke. No aggression, no bite, just a push, then a turn away from the camera and into the fire's edge. The footage aired once on local news before disappearing, written off as coincidence. But Logan saw it, and he knew. He never went back to the river bend again. He didn't need to. Some bonds aren't sustained by contact. Some are carried in the way we walk afterward, the way we pause when we hear running water, the way we watch shadows move through the trees. Years passed. Logan grew older, slower. He retired quietly. No ceremony. Just a single afternoon packing up his things and locking the ranger cabin one last time. The mountain still stood. The river still ran. The world moved on. But every now and then, someone new would arrive at the station with a story too strange to file. A bear who never growled. A bear who seemed to understand where pain lived. A bear who once sat beside a man who couldn't stop crying. And always, these stories ended the same way. The bear turned. The bear walked away. And something in the person telling the story had changed. We like to think the wild is ruled by rules. That instinct governs everything. That predators hunt, prey flees, and nothing crosses the lines written in blood and survival. But sometimes in the rarest moments, those rules break. Sometimes a man dives into a river to save a dying bear. And sometimes that bear remembers, not because it was taught to, not because it was trained, but because something inside it chose to. Something ancient, something almost human. We can't explain what lives inside those moments. Science has no language for them, but hearts do. The kind of hearts that recognize love even when it wears the wrong face. The kind that still reach out even when they know they might be left behind. Logan's story isn't just about what he did in the river that day. It's about what he found afterward, and what the bear gave back to him without ever saying a word. Because sometimes the loudest echoes come from the quietest acts, and the wild remembers more than we think. If this story touched you, if it made you see the world differently, even for a moment, consider joining us. Subscribe for more true stories that remind us that compassion, in the end, might just be nature's greatest instinct.